Welcome to Fireside Gaming. I'm Billum, and this week, we're taking a look at Lagoon for the Super Nintendo. Lagoon is one of those games that I've been meaning to play through for years now. I've started it a couple times in the past, but never put my full attention toward actually beating it. In fact, I don't know if I've ever been out of the first dungeon until now. So what exactly is Lagoon? It's a top-down action-adventure game in the style of The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. Though I think it's probably fairer to compare it to Soul Blazer, as both games have players gaining experience and leveling up. Unfortunately, Lagoon suffers from the worst combat I've ever experienced. See, the game originally came out on the X68000 computer during September 1990 in Japan. It then got a transfer to the SNES by Kemco, which are the developers behind all those generic RPGs you see on the Google Play Store. When that happened, some major changes were made to the game. That includes changing around some of the story elements, but what we really care about is the combat. The original Lagoon is similar to the East series or Hide Glide, which is to say that you crash your face into enemies to deal damage. The Super Nintendo version forgoes this for an actual sword swing made by pressing a button. The problem here is that it is without a doubt the worst attack to ever exist in a game. I'm not kidding. The range of the swing is so small that players are often going to find themselves getting hit by enemies. It's not too bad when dealing with normal enemies roving around dungeons, but it makes boss fights a test of luck and patience. This starts with the first boss of the game, Samson. It's so hard to actually hit him due to the lackluster sword swing that I ended up cheesing this fight by getting behind him and slashing his ankles until he died. Unfortunately, I couldn't do that for every boss. Nutella, the second boss in the game, just smashes into the player and it becomes a battle of attrition to beat them. Sure, there's a legit way to do it, but the hit detection just doesn't make it worth it. Players are just better off brute forcing their way through the battle instead by over-leveling. Heck, then we have to talk about Thimael. This boss sucks because it requires players to kill 6 minions before the actual fight can even begin. Yet again, it's so hard to tell when the player can and can't hit the minions. I mean, just look at this. I swear, I should be hitting this stationary enemy, but I'm not. Add into that a complete lack of a pattern for when they shoot their ice attacks, and you've got one of the worst boss fights in the game. Of course, it's not the worst boss fight there is. That title goes to the final gauntlet of boss fights. When players reach the end of the game, they have to battle not 1, not 2, not 3, 4, or 5, but 6 bosses in a row. You can't save in between them, and losing to one sends the player back to their last save. Just screw this crap. This game is not worth playing, if only because of how ridiculous the boss fights are, but there's even more reasons to never touch it. Let's take dungeon exploring for instance. Every single dungeon in Lagoon is absolutely massive, way bigger than they have any right to be. Of course, that wouldn't be so bad, but the game has no map feature whatsoever. Normally, I'm pretty good about building mental maps in my head when playing games without a map built in, but that's not the case here. There's no defining features to the dungeons that make it easy to identify where the player is or if they've been there before. I could forgive this if the dungeons at least rewarded players for exploring them, but they don't. Each dungeon may contain 1 or 2 items and 4 times as many empty rooms that are dead ends. It's a downright disrespect of the player's time and is not worth slogging through these tests of endurance to reach the end. Add into the fact that Lagoon has some of the most gotcha enemy placements ever, and it gets even worse. There's nothing like moving through an area only for a lava dragon to jump out, drag you off land, and kill you in just the span of a couple seconds. That's possible due to the lack of invincibility frames in Lagoon after being attacked. This allows enemies to easily pile on massive amounts of damage in the blink of an eye. If players do survive these attacks, then at least they can regain their health easy enough. In Lagoon, health regenerates as long as the player is standing still. The same holds true for their mana as well. However, this means players end up standing around for long periods of time waiting, or stutter-stepping around dungeons, while their health and mana regens. Also, it doesn't work in boss arenas, which is a major bummer. The only redeeming quality that Lagoon has going for it is the ability to save just about anywhere. That includes right outside of boss rooms. This makes it easy to get right back into the battle after your 10th death to the boss because of the abysmal attack range in this game. I guess I can also point out some of the animated cutscenes in the game as a highlight as well. They're pretty fun for an SNES title, even if the character designs look like generic DeviantArt art in an era before that website even existed. Of course, to counter that, we've got to talk about the in-game graphics, which are passable at best. At worst, you've got no idea when the edge of a cloud is coming up and you end up falling off it for an instant death. So take that as you will. Moving on to the audio, there's some solid music in the game, but none that makes it worth suffering through everything else to experience it. Also, some of the sound effects from enemies attacking are so dang shrill that I don't wish them on anyone's ears. I suppose I should also cover the story while I'm at it. Here's your spoiler warning, but in all reality, you should just stick around, because you won't want to play this game for yourself to see what tale it tells. Lagoon focuses on the adventures of the hero Nazir. He's been raised since he was an infant to be the champion of light. This has him operating as a well-known hero among the locals and obviously puts him in charge of saving Lakeland when the waters begin turning muddy and making people sick. Yes, it really says muddy, don't ask me. With that muddy water comes demons, which Nazir has to defeat. This has him traveling around Lakeland on his way to Lagoon Castle, which is the source of the country's water. Along the way, he meets a young man named Thor. We don't really know much about him at first, only that he seems like a nice enough guy. Unfortunately, that changes by the end of the game. See, Thor is actually the champion of darkness and Nazir's brother. Both are the sons of a god and were sent down to Lakeland to maintain a seal created by their father to trap a powerful demon. However, Thor was stolen away as a baby and raised to use his power of darkness to reawaken this demon. That ends up happening due to some unintentional help from Nazir. As a result, players end up having to kill Thor, but a miracle causes his soul to transfer to his pendant, which Nazir takes with him into the final battle. This sees Nazir defeat the demon, which the game literally just calls Evil Spirit. Doing so brings peace back to Lakeland, and we get a few scenes of Nazir holding Thor's pendant and remembering his brother. And that's the story of Lagoon. Mostly. There's also a kidnapped princess and a few other things I skimmed over, but they really aren't that important to the story. Sure, I could probably tear into the story alongside the rest of the game, but I don't feel the need to. It's generic for sure, and not really anything to write home about, but there's really not much worth picking apart here. Overall, I can't recommend playing Lagoon. I'm not mincing words here whenever I say it is the worst game I've played for this channel yet. Sure, I made that April Fool's video about Barbie on the NES being a bad game, as well as one covering Mag Max for the OG Nintendo, but Lagoon is worse than both of them, and that really says something about it. With all that said, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe if you've enjoyed watching me suffer these past few minutes. You can also hit me up on Twitter at Billum256 if you want to engage with me there. And as always, thank you for watching, and take it easy.